Okay, picture this. An ageless, godly beauty who has that superhuman strength and an unquenchable thirst for fresh blood and power. But he is in some ways more of a charming anti-hero. No brownie points for you if you thought of Dio Brando. Today, we're here to talk of a character who was born a vampire and aims to kick out the devil worshippers and supernatural threats. That is Alucard, also known as Count Dracula. Hellsing, the Japanese manga and anime series, is an intriguing reimagination of Bram Stoker's classic novel Dracula. Created by Kota Hirano, the series follows the story of the Hellsing organization, a powerful organization of vampire hunters and their fight against the undead, including the infamous Count Dracula. Hirano's work clearly borrows heavily from Stoker's Dracula, using many of the same character names and plot elements. However, Hirano manages to put his own unique spin on the story, transforming it into a parallel work of art that stands on its own. The series is not simply a retelling of Dracula, but rather a reimagining that explores the darker aspects of human nature, the consequences of immortality, and the corruption of power. In Dracula, the vampire hunters are a group of amateurs who stumble upon the existence of the undead and take it upon themselves to defeat the Count. In Hellsing, however, the organization is a well-established group with advanced technology and military-grade weaponry. The Hellsing family has been battling vampires for generations, and they're determined to rid the world of the undead menace once and for all. Another significant change Hirano makes is to the character of Alucard, the series' protagonist and a powerful vampire who serves the Hellsing organization. While Dracula is a terrifying and mysterious figure, Alucard is a complex and morally ambiguous character. He's not just a mindless killing machine, but a creature who questions his own existence and the purpose of his immortality. He is a dark reflection of humanity's own struggle with the desire for power and control. So without any further ado, let's jump right into it and, oh, beware! This video contains spoilers for the entire show. He is perhaps the second best vampire in fictional history behind the OG. How Bram Stoker's Dracula inspired Hellsing Ultimate. Bram Stoker's Dracula, a gothic horror novel published in 1897, is an epistolary masterpiece told through a series of letters, diary entries, and newspaper articles. The book's unique structure avoids a traditional protagonist, opening with solicitor Jonathan Harker's journey to stay at the castle of the enigmatic Count Dracula, a Transylvanian nobleman with an insidious secret. As Dracula moves to England, he torments the seaside town of Whitby, setting in motion a perilous hunt by a small group led by Abraham Van Helsing, culminating in Dracula's demise. Stoker meticulously drew inspiration from Transylvanian folklore and history, producing over 100 pages of notes for the book. However, the inspiration for the character of Dracula remains a subject of scholarly debate. While some suggest historical figures like Wallachian Prince Vlad the Impaler or Countess Elizabeth Bathory as potential muses, Stoker's notes do not mention either. Instead, Stoker discovered the name Dracula in Whitby's public library, choosing it because he believed it meant devil in Romanian. When Bram Stoker's novel Dracula was first published, it received favorable reviews for its effective use of horror, though some negative reviews felt it was excessively frightening. However, in the past century, Dracula has become a classic of Gothic fiction, with contemporary scholars examining its depiction of gender roles, sexuality, and race in the context of the Victorian era. Count Dracula, Stoker's creation, has had a tremendous influence on art and literature, making him one of the most recognizable characters in Western literature. Stoker drew inspiration from tales of vampires, including those by Goethe, Coleridge, and Sheridan Le Fanu, as well as from his research into the notorious Romanian tyrant Vlad III, who served as the model for Count Dracula. The characters in Dracula have become archetypes in popular culture, with Count Dracula representing the quintessential vampire and Abraham Van Helsing becoming an iconic vampire hunter. The novel, now in the public domain, has been adapted over 30 times for film, television, and other media, inspiring countless artists and writers such as Kota Hirano. Despite ongoing discussions about its origins, Dracula remains a cultural phenomenon that continues to influence popular culture today. The mangaka was inspired by the idea of Dracula and created a character called Alucard for his manga, Hellsing. His real identity is Dracula. It's just Alucard spelled backwards. He's a violent, sadistic, sadistic and masochistic vampire who initially worked for the Van Helsing family after they augmented his abilities and placed shackles on his power. He expresses admiration for humans, most notably Integra and his rival Alexander Anderson, as an example of the fantastic and magnificent qualities of humans. Hieronymus Alucard was created with a different backstory than Stoker's Dracula, but the similarities between the two characters are clear. Like Dracula, Alucard is a powerful vampire with abilities that defy human understanding. Both characters are known for their ability to taunt and belittle their opponents, often allowing themselves to be wounded before regenerating and retaliating. Both characters are also the subject of fear and fascination, inspiring a whole industry in vampire culture. In contrast to Dracula, Alucard has several notable differences. While Dracula represents pure evil as an undead creature who only seeks self-preservation and preys on human beings without any sense of empathy or humanity, Alucard is a more complex and relatable character. He experiences emotions and he can even fall in love. Additionally, Alucard has the unique ability to absorb the souls of his victims, acquiring their memories and turning them into his familiar, a type of extension of himself. Dracula's most significant contribution to popular culture is the central role he played in placing vampires at the forefront of the genre. This influence can be seen in many films, television shows, and books that feature vampires as their main characters. The vampire has evolved into a more sympathetic being in some media, having emotions and empathy, and the ability to fall in love. Dracula has inspired countless films and television series makers, and every year there are scores of vampire films released. One of the manga that Dracula influenced is Hellsing by Kota Hirano, and the character of Alucard. Alucard is a vampire who serves Hellsing and initially fought against the Ottomans. He believed that mortals should display their faith rather than just praying to God. Though he was staked in the heart, he was not destroyed, and after his defeat, he became a servant of the Van Helsing family. They augmented his already formidable abilities and placed restrictions on his power. Under the name Alucard, he was tasked with stopping Millennium's vampire production program in Warsaw, Poland, along with Walter C. Dornez. Despite being a vampire, Alucard has a deep respect for humans. He admires Integra and the unyielding determination of her rival, Alexander Anderson, as an example of humanity's better side. Perhaps the most striking difference between the two works is the ending. In Dracula, the Count is ultimately defeated by a group of heroes who band together to defeat him. In Hellsing, Alucard is the one who ultimately defeats Dracula, but at a great cost. The final battle is a chaotic and violent affair, with both characters revealing their true natures and the depths of their power. Alucard ultimately destroys Dracula, but in doing so, he reveals the true nature of his own existence and the devastating consequences of his actions. Instead of being killed by Abraham Van Helsing, Dracula ends up serving him. Helsing's version of Dracula's climax. Abraham Van Helsing, one of the main characters of Dracula, is the inspiration for the protagonist of Hellsing, Sir Integra Helsing. In the original Dracula, the group of vampire hunters successfully kills Count Dracula, the main antagonist of the novel. However, in Hellsing, Hirano chooses to take a different path. In the final battle against the vampire antagonist, Alucard, he doesn't die, but is instead brought to a weakened state where he is unable to continue his reign of terror. This is a significant departure from the original novel and allows Hirano to create a new storyline for his series. Hirano's decision to change the ending of Dracula demonstrates his creativity and his ability to adapt the classic novel to fit his own vision. He took inspiration from the original work and used it as a jumping-off point to create a new and exciting story. The Hellsing series stands on its own as a unique and engaging work of fiction, while still paying homage to the original work that inspired it. Furthermore, Hirano's decision to change the ending of the story is also a reflection of the changing attitudes towards vampires and the supernatural in modern times. While Dracula was written in the late 19th century when superstitions about vampires were still prevalent, the Hellsing series was written in the 21st century when vampires have become a popular cultural phenomenon. The opening scene of the Hellsing Ultimate OVA number 1 sets the stage for an intense and thrilling experience. The London Police Department has called upon Division 11 to handle a supernatural threat in Cheddar Village. However, even the elite officers of D11 were unable to handle the situation, leading to the Hellsing organization's intervention. Integra Hellsing, the head of the organization, dispatched only one member for the mission, Alucard. Upon arriving at the village, Alucard encounters a young female officer named Saris Victoria, who is fleeing from her infected colleagues. She hesitates to shoot them, but Alucard arrives just in time to save her from a ghoul. Alucard's motive for serving humans humans is questioned when he mentions about sucking blood. Sarah shoots him in the shoulder, but his injury heals instantly, indicating he isn't human. She flees and finds refuge in a church, where a priest hypnotizes her and tries to turn her into a ghoul. Alucard kicks down the door to the church, calling the priest a punk. The priest summons a D11 ghoul army, but Alucard doesn't stop. Instead, he insults the priest while berating him and calling him a narrow-minded king. Alucard wipes out the vicar's army of D11 ghouls with ease. With no hope left, Saras looks down until mist covers the entire place, and the blood coming out of Alucard's corpse starts to regenerate him. The reason why Alucard did not attack Integra is that he is bound by his servitude to the Hellsing family. Alucard's bond of servitude is explored in detail throughout the Hellsing series. The Hellsing family has been serving the British crown for generations, and as the most powerful vampire, Alucard is bound to serve the current head of the family, Integra. He is compelled to follow her orders, protect her and the organization, and serve as their garbage disposal unit. Alucard's loyalty to the Hellsing family is tested several times throughout the series. Still, his devotion remains unwavering due to his belief that the Hellsing family is essential to keeping the peace between humans and supernatural creatures. His code of honor and duty dictate that he follows the orders of his superiors, even if he may not agree with them. Alucard, the immortal vampire in the manga series Hellsing, is well known for his extreme devotion to his current master and the leader of the Hellsing organization, Integra Hellsing. Their relationship is one of a master and servant, which is complex but strictly defined. This relationship has its roots in Integra's connection to Alucard since her father's death. Arthur Hellsing, her father, named her the new head of the Hellsing organization, which drove her jealous uncle to try and kill her. In her escape from him, she found Alucard's corpse in the sublevels of the Hellsing estate, and shortly after, he pledged his allegiance to her as his new master. Since then, Alucard has been extremely devoted to Integra and has protected her from all threats. Despite his extreme devotion to her, Alucard has never attacked Integra, even though he has shown no such restraint with others. The reason for this lies in Alucard's bond of servitude with the Hellsing family, which he has been serving for centuries. As such, Integra is the only person whom Alucard will obey, and her life and honor are some of the few things he openly protects. Alucard is willing to do anything for his beloved master, even if it means going against his own instincts and desires. Alucard's respect for Integra is evident throughout the series, and it grows over time. He addresses her as Hakushaku, meaning count, in Volume 8, indicating that he accepts her as his equal in power. Alucard's respect for her also extends to her willpower and her ability to fight for her life, which he finds admirable. He even acknowledges her strength when she tears open her own throat to get Laura's blood out to avoid becoming a ghoul. Alucard's bond of servitude with the Hellsing family is a powerful one, and it stems from his deep admiration and respect for their legacy. He is a vampire who has lived for centuries, and his experiences have shown him the darker side of humanity. Despite his disdain for humans, Alucard respects those who fight for their lives with a willpower that is unlike any other. The Hellsing family is one of the few human families that have gained his respect, and as such, Alucard is willing to do anything to protect them. The only trump card Hellsing needs. Alucard's role in Hellsing Ultimate and his rivalry with Alexander Anderson. Alucard's rivalry with Father Alexander Anderson was well known all along. Right from the time he encountered Saras and Alexander that fateful night, their relationship has been a complicated one. But first, what was his purpose in the Hellsing organization? Sir Integra and her organization worked in the shadows, moving in stealth to purge any unnatural elements the Crown might deem as an enemy. This includes supernatural entities such as werewolves and vampires, where Alucard comes into play. Being the most powerful vampire on Earth, and perhaps even the most overpowered character in the whole anime, he has the power to wipe his enemies out without much struggle, if he even considers them worthy of his time, that is. But that changed when he met Father Anderson. All this time, Alucard was in search of an opponent who can stand on equal grounds with him, someone who will remove the monotony of his power even for a while. Locked within his formidable power, Alucard's abilities are kept in check by the Control Art restriction system and can only be accessed by the Cromwell invocation. These restrictions come in 6 levels, with lower numbers signifying greater power, and Alucard often announces which level he is releasing prior to combat. While it is uncertain whether this is a requirement of the release mechanism, it is likely used to intimidate his opponents, as befits his persona. Though Alucard can release his power up to level 1 by himself, his ultimate form, level 0, requires his master's approval. This lowest level grants him unfettered access to to his most destructive powers, and also influences his appearance and fighting style. Alucard's Count form is typically assumed up to level 1, retaining his original persona as Count Dracula. However, he reserves his bare hands for humans, using them to finish off vampire victims in a gruesome fashion. Beyond being a measure of Alucard's growing strength, the release states having a profound effect on his mannerisms and tactics. His monstrous nature is perfectly suited to his Count form, and he uses his guns to devastating effect. But that is just one of his abilities, although it is the most important one. After leaving his humanity behind, he gained many powers, such as superhuman strength, speed, and reflexes, combat experience, crazy regeneration speed that also gave him immortality, intangibility, hematophagy, which allows him to consume raw blood, self-preservation by going into a dormant state if he goes without blood for too long, and also being made up of some nefarious otherworldly substance that allows him to endure almost all damage to his physical body, because this reddish-black goo is immune to weapons made by humans which do not have divinity in them. Okay, so now that we've discussed his powers and his role in the organization, what does Anderson have to do with all of this? Anderson was one of the few humans who managed to give Alucard that exhilaration one feels when they finally find their match. Alucard respects him in a way he respects Van Helsing, because he could defeat him, or at least had the power to attempt to. Throughout the series, the strongest character, in terms of pure human strength, was undoubtedly Anderson. Though humans are significantly weaker than their vampire and werewolf counterparts, Alexander was a formidable opponent in the world of the series. Compared to the other two trump cards of the three organizations, Alucard and the Captain, Alexander may have been the weakest, but this should not be taken as an offense to him. Anderson possessed superhuman abilities in strength, reflexes, and speed, as well as impressive durability and endurance. His level of regeneration was also notable, even if limited. While wielding the Nail of Helena, Anderson's strength reached a whole new level. In fact, he almost succeeded in killing Alucard for good, despite the latter being in his weakest form. Anderson's regeneration and damage output also significantly increased when using the nail. Additionally, his thorn vines were a force to be reckoned with, speaking for themselves in terms of his power. In Anderson, Alucard discovers a reflection of himself and anticipates a battle that would end with Anderson defeating him as a mortal. But this hope fizzles out when Anderson impales himself with Helena's nail, transforming into a hybrid of human and thorny vines. Alucard pleads with Anderson to fight him as a human, but his request goes unanswered. The fight rages on, and Anderson seems to have the upper hand until Alucard turns the tables and emerges victorious. Even as his enemy lay dying in front of him, all the vampire could do was shed tears for his adversary, shouting that they are both alike. He weeps for the man Anderson used to be, the one who he saw as his equal, and for his own past actions. Anderson's last words to Alucard cut deep, as he implies that Alucard became a monster to avoid showing any vulnerability, stating that monsters don't cry, and that's why you became one, isn't it? So you wouldn't have to. Ain't that a rivalry worth shedding tears for? God's servant who committed inhuman atrocities in his name and was cursed for it, Alucard's defense of Britain, and his true backstory. The climax of the Hellsing Ultimate anime centers around the final battle between Millennium and Hellsing. The arrival of the Vatican forces in London signals the start of the attack on the Millennium forces and the remaining citizens, led by Archbishop Enrico Maxwell. Despite the Doctor's pleas to take cover, the Major fearlessly stands on the nose of his airship. Walter, who now stands with the Major, slices apart a Vatican helicopter and tries to attack the Millennium commander. Alexander Anderson expresses his disappointment with Maxwell for disregarding God's will in favor of his own desires. The Iscariot Paladins are given new orders to capture Integra, but Ceres, who has become a true vampire, knocks them away. Anderson stops Heinkel and Yumi from attacking, knowing that they are no match for Ceres. When Alucard returns to London, Anderson knows that chaos is about to ensue and grins savagely. Alucard lands in the courtyard where the Papal Knights and the Letsta Battalion are facing off. Anderson appears amidst a flurry of Bible pages, and the captain leaps from the Deus Ex Machina to confront the other trump cards. Meanwhile, the Major proclaims that everything is in place, and the curtain is about to rise on this Walpurgis dawn. Integra orders Alucard to destroy their enemies, and she releases Control Art Restriction Level 0, instructing Alucard to announce his return. Alucard replies with, "I am the Bird of Hermes," and his coffin begins to glow. He unleashes his full full power, reconstituting his stolen souls as familiars and creating an army of millions. The familiars overpower the Papal Knights and Waffen SS, with Tubalcain Alhambra and Rip Van Winkle taking down the Vatican's air support. When Archbishop Enrico Maxwell accuses Alucard of consuming his own soldiers and subjects, he calls him by his true name, Dracula. Alucard reappears in his original form as Vlad the Impaler and sends his familiars into the city. Although the Archbishop is surrounded by Alucard's familiars, they are unable to penetrate the shield that protects him. The world is in complete chaos as the final officials of Millennium demand orders and support from their leader, the Major, on the Arthur Sayce Inquart Zeppelin. As they await orders, the Major casually tells them to enjoy the spectacle of the Zeppelin crashing into London, while ordering his remaining men to make one final stand. The insubordinate captain opposes the Major and is quickly and dramatically killed to teach his men to obey. Meanwhile, Alucard has a flashback to when he was sexually assaulted as a young child by an Ottoman, putting his faith in the Lord. As Vlad the Impaler, he rides with his army on horseback against the Ottomans and explains his philosophy regarding God. During the battle, Sarras tries to help Alucard by holding the bayonet away from him, but Anderson's holy vines burn her arm as she attempts to assist her master. Alucard ultimately defeats Anderson by ripping out his heart, and the traitor Walter reveals his true allegiance to Millennium. He kills Yumi and incapacitates Heinkel before taunting Alucard and demanding a fight. Alucard transforms into his dog form and fights Walter, ultimately defeating him. The revelation of Alucard's true identity adds another layer to his character, as he is none other than Vlad the Impaler, the historical figure known for his brutal tactics in war. Alucard's true identity is hinted at in earlier volumes of the series, and in Volume 8, his full identity is made plain when Integra places his control level at 0 and greets him with, "Welcome back, Count." During his reign as the monarch of Wallachia, Vlad Tepes was notorious for his use of impalement as a means of execution, with some victims being kept alive for several days before ultimately succumbing to death. It is estimated that he was responsible for the deaths of anywhere between 40,000 to 100,000 of his enemies and other wrongdoers in his country. When he chose to execute someone, he typically impaled them through the center of their torso, with the stake entering through the groin and emerging from the mouth. These brutal methods have made Vlad Tepes one of the most feared and infamous figures in history, and through it all, Alucard's complex identity as both a man and a vampire adds depth and nuance to his character, making him a fascinating and compelling protagonist. He dies and comes back stronger than ever before. Alucard becomes an omnipotent being. In the final showdown, Alucard is faced with his nemesis, the Major, who is protected behind bulletproof glass. Outside the room, Schrödinger slits his own throat and decapitates himself, falling into a river of blood that flows through London and ultimately reaches Alucard. Alucard accidentally drinks Schrödinger's blood and gains the power of being everywhere and nowhere, as Schrödinger's power was to straddle quantum possibilities. Alucard gains complete control over his own perspective and becomes free from the influence of God or the devil. Alucard returns 30 years later and appears in Integra's room, about to bite her neck, but is shot by her. Sarras bursts in, and they realize the identity of the intruder. Alucard explains that he had to fight every single soul inside of him except one, and now has the power of Schrödinger. He can be wherever he needs to be and can be whatever he needs to be. Alucard serves Integra out of choice, not as a servant of House Hellsing by spells or ritual. He is free from the constraints placed on him in the Hellsing Institute by politics or religion. With this power, Alucard has become what he had always hoped he would be. Marvelous verdict! Alucard, the most menacing adaptation of Dracula, is also the most tragic. Despite his invincibility and snarky attitude, his backstory is filled with pain and sorrow. Sold into slavery as a child and repeatedly molested, Alucard became a vengeful maniac known for his excessive cruelty and was sentenced to be beheaded. His only escape was to become a bloodthirsty vampire, but he was unable to be with the love of his life, Mina Harker. He was held, tortured, and experimented on for decades, ultimately becoming nothing more than a submissive attack dog. His life was filled with very little happiness until he met Integra and Sarras. The anime Hellsing portrays vampires with a variety of powers, including the ability to turn into smoke and commanding wolves. Vampires are vulnerable during the day and can't use their full powers, a trait found in both Hellsing and Dracula. Both exude incredible power and a sense of sadness, highlighting the drawbacks of being a corrupted being of the night. Alucard is portrayed sympathetically as a weary creature who wishes for rest and empathizes with Father Anderson. Despite his fearsome reputation, he desires to have someone to share in his pain, which may be why he turned Saras into a vampire. Interestingly, both the book and anime compare vampires to children, despite their immortal existence. But the character of Alucard attempts to portray both sides of Vlad Dracula's life as a vicious killer and a harsh yet noble warrior, giving a nod to the real-life figure that inspired this character. That's it for this vampiric video, so thanks for watching, be safe out there, and have a marvelous day.